Thank you so much, Amanda. And greetings to all of you. Hello, friends. I hope you're well, enjoying this, what feels like a summer morning out there. Perfect day to practice together before heading on out and enjoying the day. Um, and yeah, so what I have in mind for today is a topic that is it's still being kind of shaped by people both in Dharma communities, in the tech world, and I'll explain a little bit more about sort of how I fell into this and developed a course that I'm teaching now for the second time at Harvard Extension School that I think a couple of folks here on the call have taken. It's called Mindfulness, AI, and Ethics, Cultivating the Heart of the Algorithm. And in the process of kind of monitoring and learning, myself learning, I'm not an expert in AI or coding or machine learning or anything. I know basics, but it's been a really interesting journey to now have gone for 2 years with a class, with a cohort, and some of whom in those cohorts have been quite knowledgeable about AI and technology, and have worked in the field as engineers, coding. So it's been kind of like a process learning model. But what I'd like to do today is going to be more of a talk than necessarily just a Dharma teaching. Not just a Dharma teaching. I didn't mean it in that way. But more so of a talk. I have some slides to share with you and really some reflections that I think for Buddhists are really important to consider during these times. Whether you like AI or you can't stand it, people on all sides, usually after we consider kind of the risks and benefits, pros and cons, usually end up somewhere in the middle, cautious, optimistic, and also a little bit nervous about the speed and the rate at which these technologies are unfolding. So it's really relevant for Dharma folks and practitioners to think about how Buddhism can inform this conversation. So that's what I'm planning to do today, is just share with you some of the things that I've been looking into, some of the research, and then also hopefully some insights from my end, and then also to hear from you all about your experiences and what you think constitutes wisdom as opposed to just a sense of information, knowledge, or what we might call intelligence. So we're going to start, though, by reciting our bodhicitta aspiration, which is something that we do often in Buddhist contexts to really set a really good, wholehearted intention that our time together is really geared towards really ultimate flourishing for all beings. And setting our intention in that way is really helpful for us as we come back to that basic motivation of wholesomeness in terms of our gathering, our practice, and then the dedication will finish us up at the end by carrying that forward into our lives. So let me share screen here. I'm going to pull up by Jigme Lingpa the bodhicitta recitation, which is both used at Natural Dharma and also in the community online that meets every Sunday evening, except we're not meeting this evening. And feel free to recite this along with me. If you're not used to reciting, you can just simply just open your heart, see how this aspiration and these words land within your own heart. Bodhicitta recitation. Mesmerized by the sheer variety of perceptions, which are like illusory reflections of the moon in water, beings wander endlessly astray in samsara's vicious cycle. In order that all might find comfort and ease in the luminosity and all-pervading space of the true nature of their minds, may I scatter freely the immeasurable love, compassion, joy, and equanimity of the awakened mind, the heart of bodhicitta. So before we move into practice, we'll start with a guided meditation for a bit. I'd like to read to you. Let's see if I can find it. This is a quote by Longchenpa. Longchenpa was the great Dzogchen master who wrote many treatises, actually 7 treasuries, if you will, really cutting right into the heart in very poetic ways about the experience of great perfection, of emptiness, of the enlightened mind. And so this quote is from the Song of the Vajra Garuda text, and this portion is called Space Without Center or Edge. So Longchenpa writes to us, every moment is an unbound flow of empty, natural knowing. Memories and thoughts all vanish, empty, traceless like the sky. Mind and mental states are baseless, rootless, inconcrete, empty, and devoid of entities to grasp. Such an open vastness. Space of great awakening beyond accepting and rejecting. Expanse of self-existing and unchanging knowing. This flow of great perfection that transcends the intellect. Omnipotent knowing that embraces all phenomena. Such an open vastness. So let me pull up my bells. And we're going to start, we're going to basically just do practice of sort of a graduated continuum into what we call natural awareness. And this quality of natural awareness, that which, if you're at all part of natural Dharma or Wonderwell, this is a term that you're probably quite familiar with. Lama Willa, Lama Liz. This is a wonderful way to articulate a quality of open, natural spaciousness of mind. And this will become relevant later in our discussion, which we don't need to focus on right now, other than just our own personal practice. And we'll see later how this might be relevant. I'm not going to feed you any seeds for further thought or rumination quite yet. So as we're about to go into practice. So go ahead and just find your posture, your position, your practice space. If you're if you're sitting at a table or desk, maybe be sure that there's a little space between you and the furniture, just so you have some room around you, some space around your body. And you may keep your eyes open, closed, or alternate, depending on what you find most supportive for your practice. Some people like to turn off the camera or face away from the camera to the side. That's perfectly fine too. Okay. Well, welcome back to your meditation, to this mindfulness of the present moment. This blessing of an opportunity to simply drop in and open to the wonderful, spacious truth of the present. And let's just focus in first on our breathing. If you're sleepy or groggy this morning, you can take a long inhale, shorter exhale, just to wake up, awaken the senses. At the same time, if the mind is busy or restless, you can take a short inhale and a long exhale to relax. And we're always moderating these two, the inhale and the exhale, depending on the feeling state of the moment, the feeling tone, and just allowing it to be natural, an effortless gesture, simply breathing. Awakening the senses, whether eyes are open or closed, you can just sense the light of this day. The subtlety of this brightness. And as you encounter the brightness of this day, of this morning, just knowing that touching this brightness, that you embody it as well. There is here no inside and outside. There is simply this moment of brightness, presence, and the flow of this in-breath and the release of this out-breath. Feeling this breath to be round, and deep, and soft. Feeling this body to be upright and stable and present like a mountain. And here we can also just let the mind be as it is. This amazing opportunity simply to unhook, disentangle ourselves from the flow of arising thoughts, dispersing thoughts. Like watching children in a playground, we don't have to be involved in the stories that are unfolding there. Just simply relating with care, with mindfulness to all that arises. And watching each experience just dissolve on its own. And checking in with the body from time to time and just noticing any places that might be contracted or a little off balance. We can just gently breathe in and lift and open the chest, and also feel the spine ascend a bit. Head right on top of the shoulders, chin down a bit, and we feel that lengthening of the neck, the easing of the jaw muscles, the softening of cheekbones, eyes, forehead. Settling into simplicity. No longer doing or striving or trying, just allowing and being just as you are. And at the heart of this space, the experience of formlessness, of awareness that needs no grasping, that is simply self-evident, present, and still. Breathing into that space, Breathing out, we release into that space. Natural awareness. Like a clear, open, and bright sky. So we might consider this as gathering the mind home, letting go of outward directed energy, impulse, clinging. And here is what we can also define as suchness, thusness. Open awareness to things as they are right in this moment. The gentle flow of breath in and out. And you might also consider, not with your intellect, but with just sort of a intuitive sense. What is this becoming? This sense of becoming that has no form. This inner sense of vitality and potential. That from this place of deep awareness, all things are present to you here and now. In the sutras, the Buddha tells us luminous is this mind, brightly shining, free of all attachments that come and go. And at the heart of this luminous mind arises joy, like a flower opening in the morning sun. The fragrance of this flower is that of love, bodhicitta, caring, kindness. So we'll just abide here and practice quietly for a few more minutes, and until the bell brings us back. And take your time. No need to rush out of meditation. And if you prefer just to stay in a particular space you've created in your practice, that's fine as well. We're going to take a short break. Sometimes it's nice just to rub your hands together, feel the heat that builds up, and then just rubbing the eyes, the neck, the chest, whatever helps you regain a sense of being in your body. So we'll take 8 minutes. Let's take an 8-minute break until 10:50 Eastern Time. And we'll see you then. Good to also, if you want, do some stretching, some twists. Okay, welcome back. So as people are settling back in, I'm going to read something else to you by the great Rilke. There is a piece that I think is very relevant to our theme from Rilke's Sonnets to Orpheus, 118. This is the source of this. And some of you may know of Rilke, some may not, but very profound poet with a very, very unique and deep view of things. This is Sonnets to Orpheus. So he writes, Orpheus, do you hear the new sound? Droning and roaring. Many now exult in it. Though the machine insists on our praise, who can listen with all this noise? See, it rolls over everything, weakening us and taking our place. Since its strength is of our making, why can't it serve and not possess us? So I'm curious. I have you all here on gallery view, and I'd like to take a poll here. How many people really like AI? It's okay to be transparent. We need honesty here, and you can just sort of wave. Do you like AI? Is it something that you're like really keen on, excited about? And okay, yes. Great. Okay, thank you for weighing in here. How many of you really don't like it? Maybe even are tired of hearing about it? Okay. About the same number. Interesting. Great. Okay. Believe me, neither side is alone. Yep. Thank you. Great. How many people, two more questions. How many people know a lot about it? Really think they understand sort of AI in a general sense, not like an engineering sense? Yes. Okay. Wow. Good. So there are some folks here who understand it, and I'm noticing that some of the people who like it actually also know about it, and that's significant. And then the last question, how many people know absolutely nothing about it from a general sort of technical standpoint? Okay, thank you for being honest. I appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, so it's the jury is sort of even here in terms of evaluating and judging what we call AI, which is really more accurately probably termed machine learning, yeah, ML. But AI is kind of the the buzzword. It's perhaps a little more interesting. And I'm going to share with you. I'm going to go ahead and just share with you. We'll do a little bit of a general orientation. So if you're really familiar with AI, hopefully this is a review, or you can go back into meditation if necessary. Uh, let's see. Let me share my slides, and we'll see if I get kicked out of this when I go into screen presenting, which sometimes happens. Aha, it worked. Great. On my account, I always get knocked out and I have to go back in. So, are you all seeing this slide that I'm very proud of creating yesterday? So, basically, the theme here, even though it's, I'm calling this the Dharma of AI, from intelligence to wisdom. And you'll see sort of why this possibly matters moving forward. And really, my agenda here is to kind of look in to see how might a Buddhist really understand AI. This is not to say all Buddhists think the same way. Yeah, there are different lineages that see it differently, as we'll see in a moment. The story kind of behind this was my TA Tajay at Extension School at Harvard. He and we developed courses. I've been teaching for 12 years at Extension, 15 at Harvard Divinity School. The courses at Harvard Extension that some of you might be familiar with and have taken they begin kind of with a course called Mindfulness, Meaning, and Resilience, where we look at the teaching of Satipatthana, the Buddha's teaching of mindfulness, the whole ecosystem of it. We look at resilience theory and positive psychology and neuroplasticity, brain science, and also contemplative practices. Then there's a course called Compassion, Science, and the Contemplative Arts, which we're just wrapping up now in this semester, looking at contemplative practices and compassion training, also sort of scientific views of meditation, all of that. Another course called Enlightenment, Horizons of Human Potential and Flourishing, where we look at different schools of enlightenment in South Asian religions and Central Asia. And at that point, I wanted to propose a new course and thought, so where do we go from there? What comes after enlightenment as a theme? Well, the real world through the lens of what is unfolding. And in this case, of course, technology. So this is what, over a lovely pizza dinner, Tajay, my TA, and I, we sort of generated this idea. And he, at the time, was doing some work at MIT and learning about machine learning and emotional learning among machines and that kind of thing. And we started talking about it and saw just the impact, the seriousness of this for our society. And so we began designing this course and doing the research and reading books. Fascinating. So basically what this has led to is kind of a forming, if you will, of some of the key themes around machine learning, artificial intelligence, and where it's heading, and why it might be important for Buddhists to really pay attention. Even if we're not involved in the world of technology or anything, but this is inevitable. This is not going away. So those of you who don't like AI, this is the bad news for you anyway. It's that this is here. It will continue to evolve, and it is evolving very, very fast, very rapidly. So here's an example of part of that evolution, so-called evolution. I want to introduce you to Gabby. Has anybody heard of Gabby? No? Who is Gabby? So Gabby is a newly ordained Buddhist monk through the Jogye Center, the Jogye lineage of Korean Buddhism. As you can see here, Jogye is a robot and an AI. And he is now officially an ordained Buddhist monk. Yeah. And they've named, I don't know where Gabby comes from, but Gabby is about to embark on a long, probably very long career as a Dharma teacher and as a monk. And if you look at some of the articles written about Gabby, you begin to see that there are opinions all over the board. So for the tech folks and the Buddhists and the monastic community that sort of have given birth to Gabby, part of their rationale is that, number one, this will appeal to young people, to youth, right? That they want Buddhism to be out there as kind of a trendy, more sort of relatable to young folks. Okay, I think the aspiration is good. They also see the importance of tech in a more broad sense as fundamentally being in dialogue somehow with Dharma, with contemplative practices. Okay, I'm not against that. The Mind and Life conferences that are ubiquitous annually, in my circle anyway, happen every year. And these are important conversations. And I think this too is an important conversation. But the detractors here say this is really almost blasphemous in a Buddhist sense, that it kind of is devaluing the sacredness of ordaining into a monastic, kind of a monastic context, that it really sells short what it means to truly be ordained as a monastic. So, and then you have opinions sort of all in the middle here. And we're going to come back to Gabby later on, and I'll give you my sort of assessment here for what it's worth. But first, let's sort of roll it back a little bit and look at what is artificial intelligence. What do we mean when we talk about it? So there are versions of artificial intelligence that are operational as we speak, even what we call multimodal platforms, which are various different platforms that work in synchrony with each other, ideally in synchrony. And there are still bugs, yes. But if we look at sort of 3, possibly 4 main forms here of AI, in general, what we're talking about is what's called, as I mentioned, what's called machine learning. This is basically mathematics, yeah, computer programming based on algorithmic designs. So an algorithm is a series of what are called rules, or mathematical data, basically, that function to work to produce a desired result. So algorithmic design rooted in mathematical rules. And these rely on this key piece of technology called large language models, LLMs. Large language models, these are basically systems that gather an enormous amount of information very, very quickly, scanning through, pulling in relevant data based on search functions or on questions, And largely, this data is limited to the internet. Yeah. And to the coding that people put into their algorithmic design. So trying to narrow down what are called predictions. If you put a question into ChatGPT, there's a process that happens very quickly where basically data information that is online is aggregated on a huge scale and then brings you sort of an output, an answer, or a result of some kind that hopefully is accurate. So if we look at kind of the main categories here of AI, the one that we are in now is called artificial intelligence, sometimes called general artificial intelligence. But for people in the business, they know it more as artificial narrow intelligence. And what that means is basically that it's task focused. As I mentioned, it pulls together data very, very quickly from many, many sources. And it's based on search criteria and the responsiveness to the search criteria that is also learning as we input more information and engage with more dialogue. So this is why learning or machine learning matters, because the more we engage with it personally, the more it gets to know our preferences and is designed actually to be responsive to where we are. This will continue to increase as far as personalized responses, or what they call rewards. Rewards are, you got it right, this is a good answer, and losses are, this is an inaccurate response. I don't know if anybody has had anything that comes back to you and you go, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. Accuracy is a problem still. And part of that is because it's designed to deliver what you're asking it for. And if it doesn't exist, it will still occasionally make something up. And there are some lawyers in my courses who have actually relied on things like Claude and ChatGPT for case studies to sort of make a point when they're going to trial. And what they have found is, on more than one occasion, I've been hearing that AI will make up cases that don't exist. Yeah. Because it's designed to give you a response. So you can see there's a lot here going on that can be problematic. And we'll see the benefits in a moment. So, but this is kind of partly the terrain we're in right now. And as you can see here, the last one is called agentic AI, developed by a company called Anthropic. Agentic is a more sort of sophisticated form of this that can bring logic and reasoning, quote unquote, into action, into a desired response. And we'll talk more about that later if we want to. Where we're headed is this sort of next gen AI called artificial general intelligence. And what this means is largely that it's still fairly theoretical. It's not too far off, possibly. Basically, AGI is sort of very similar here to replicating human cognition in terms of understanding, learning multiple domains. And so I used the term multimodal earlier. These multimodal systems will be even more sophisticated and much broader to encompass a greater amount of how humans think and problem solve and create. Yeah. Creativity, by the way, being part of that. Problem solving, perception, adapting without human prompts or programming. And AGI will be able, theoretically, to conduct its own research. So here we're talking also about abstract thinking, which it's not terribly good at the moment. There have been studies done on creativity, abstract thinking, novelty, and it kind of doesn't do very well still on sort of producing things that are really that innovative. Although, as we'll see, some of the benefits are certainly in composition and certain ideas for design and so on. But anyway, this will continue then to match basically what humans are capable of doing in a myriad of different ways, including abstract thought and so on. And then we come to that which is even further off, but this is the part that people are nervous about: artificial superintelligence, or ASI. And here we're talking about basically a design that goes way past what humans are capable of. Yeah, and in some ways it already is. There was a bacterial infection, a disease that took physicians 10 years, researchers 10 years to find an antidote for. And when they replicated all of the data, it took ChatGPT 3 days to figure out what took 10 years. So pretty remarkable in many ways. So the surpassing for now is definitely has to do with complexity and speed and all of that. So this is just a very general kind of overview of AI. When we talk about AI, and of course, there are new things coming out constantly between last year's class and this year's class. I had to basically redo the entire syllabus and have mostly all new readings just because there was so much coming out. So anyway, those of you who took it last year, you might feel like you missed out this time around. I'm happy to share those resources with you. Okay, well, let's look at what intelligence is from the standpoint here of Western science or Western materialism specifically. And this is kind of where things get sticky outside the realm of technology and in the realm of neuroscience. Yeah. So intelligence here are some bullet points that are sort of commonly held among kind of the various disciplines in psychology and neuroscience. Basically, intelligence is seen by the scientific community as perception and reason. Now, this was also echoed by Aristotle back as a philosophical point, that this is what imbues humanity with intelligence, or sapience, as we'll see in a moment. Homo sapien comes from sapience, meaning intelligent, yeah, as opposed to sentient, which means responsive or capable of feeling and reacting. All of these, however, relate to living beings from a Buddhist standpoint. Yeah, whether they're sentient beings or sapient beings, they are beings, which matters for our conversation. Logic, largely intellect and practical action for a particular outcome. So this is where we are, and this often is one of the definitions for intelligence is that there is the capacity to act and facilitate an outcome. So that's very interesting. So here it's perception, reason, and action. And the action part is already there. It's already yielding results, but this will continue to get more sophisticated. And I'll give you an example, and that is a little robot named Figgy, F-I-G-G-Y. Figgy is a robot that busses tables at my mom's retirement community. Figgy rolls around on wheels. Interestingly, you have people with walkers. So my mom is 93 this year. And, you know, most of the people in the dining room are sort of in that range somewhere. And here's this robot whizzing around very quickly, surprisingly, unsettlingly quickly. and carrying the dishes back into the kitchen and coming back out. And this thing is, it's like it has a mind of its own. Well, it kind of does. Basically, it is already doing practical, quote unquote, action. How it navigates walkers, wheelchairs, people with canes. Anyway, I'm sure they have a liability clause there in the contract people sign when they move in. But Figgy is very good at this. Yeah. You may have heard about the deliveries that are done, these little things running around with wheels that deliver packages. Supposedly in China, this is already driverless cars, deliveries without the human being as part of the equation, at least in terms of the action. The other thing that is often touted as intelligence is the ability or the capacity to predict cause and effect. Yeah. So we could say that, well, action yields a result. This is something that large language models are already working to do. That there is kind of a process here of saying, look, if you do this, this could be the outcome, yeah, and so on. Often, also, intelligence is seen largely through an evolutionary approach, that evolving brain functioning is responsible for very practical reasons. To function, to design, that we have this cortical layer of the brain, also what we call left brain activity or rational thought, cognition, executive function. And so far, what we're looking at are these two terms, sapience and sentience. So if you're a Buddhist, you might have said, may all sentient beings be well, happy, and so on. And here we're talking about sentient beings are beings, again, that feel and react. So this could include, this long-running 2,000-year-old dialogue, are plants sentient? I think they are, because my plants always respond to how I'm taking care of them. And sometimes, if I'm sad, I will notice it when I'm looking at my plants. It's kind of an odd thing there. Nevertheless, sapience is the capacity for intelligence. And the problem is, as I see it, that we measure everything according to human intelligence. So we might, first of all, want to expand our view of intelligence to include things like bees, and how bees have almost a perfect intelligence for their ecosystem and their context. Yeah, that it doesn't just involve language or simply communication, but there's more there than just thoughts, as we may already know through our teachings. So the questions here: where does consciousness fit into this? And what about experience? In fact, these two terms, sapience and sentience, do imply experience of some kind. And how does awareness fit into this? And of course, we can look at this as a problem of consciousness in psychology and Western science. We don't know where consciousness comes from an empirical background. There are theories about it evolving from the brainstem and into the limbic brain, the amygdala, the limbic brain, into the cortical layer, and so on. But we still can't find the source of it. We can find kind of consciousness is possible throughout the entire body. In fact, this ancient term we find in Buddhism, nama rupa, name and form, which when it's used, when the Buddha used it, is mind-body. So this isn't just something those of us that were around in the 60s and 70s. Well, I was a tiny little person in the 60s, but mind-body didn't just start with hippies or that kind of movement. This goes back literally to the interrelationship between mind and the physicality of body. This matters, yeah. What Anil Seth, a researcher into consciousness and AI, calls the biological substrate of a human being, matters for our intelligence. And this is something machines do not have. Okay, what is artificial? Let's look at the definition here of artificial. And if you look this up, which I did, I looked into Encyclopedia Britannica, and I thought, what do we mean by this term? Yeah, let's have a sense here, not just a euphemistic version of it, but literally, are we using the correct term here? Artificial. Another term that's often used is autonomous intelligence. That comes later. We're not quite there yet. Artificial, though, implies simulation. Yeah. And in many ways, we simulate reality based on our filters and our projections. This is something we're trying to get away from in our meditation, or at least not trying to, but trying to see through, to penetrate with clarity, with awareness. So simulation, okay, not a problem here if we're aware that it's a simulation. Another definition is not occurring naturally, that basically something artificial is not in its basic form, quote unquote, natural. Yeah, which can also mean, point to the next set of terms, contrived or false. In other words, intentionally put together or not a reflection of truth. This, of course, can all be disputed, and I get it. And I'm not married to this definition of artificial if it needs to adapt based on our current understandings. The other thing you'll find is that artificial implies a copy of something natural. So if we hold Gabby in mind, maybe this is already apparent to you. If Gabby is in our thinking, is this what we're looking at? Simulation, something that is not natural, something that is contrived. I don't know about false. I don't know that false is relevant here. It may be. Or a copy of something that is, in fact, actual in some way. So, at present, when we look at this term intelligence, it is mathematics from the standpoint of AI. So AI intelligence is mathematics powered by design thinking and electricity. So without power, without electrical power of some kind, you have no AI. And this is by Stuart Russell from a very good book, one of the texts we use in the class called Human Compatible. It's a very dense, in some places, a very technical text, but I found it to be a very helpful overview. Okay, so let's look here. How does AI presently benefit humans the most? I originally had this slide saying, how does AI alleviate suffering? And I thought, let's not jump into that yet. Yeah, because right now, it's more about how is it helpful? How is it practical? And there are some areas where AI is just marvelous. As I mentioned earlier, the speed of data processing through large language models is phenomenal. And so it can aggregate large data, what are called predictions. In other words, it will give you a result very quickly from a huge amount of data on the internet. Let's keep that in mind. It also is very good at dealing with complexity, breaking down complex features, something that may stymie the mind. If you've ever had sort of a series of different things that you're writing, let's say, and it's kind of hard to quote unquote wrap your mind around, you can go into ChatGPT, Claude, or Perplexity, or what's the other one, Jasper, Apple's AI, Grok, Pi, and so on, and come out with a result that's not going to be the same on all of these different platforms, but you'll have sort of varying degrees of handling complexity and what the output is. There are also very practical advances and applications for life-enhancing technologies, especially in medical science. We're seeing some pretty remarkable things, surgical tools, diagnostic medicine, efficiency, innovation. People are using AI for innovating. Capabilities. What is possible to do now with this collaborator, with this tool, if you will, and also doing menial tasks. And I know a lot of people who use AI for their emails, so they don't have to sit there and compose a new email all the time, but they have these platforms, they'll run something through and boom, here's an email and it goes out. So it also is very capable at assisting with design, writing and composition. So I know when my students have run their papers through an AI platform and it comes back perfectly without without flaws, and sometimes it's not how they think or speak, then it's like, okay, somebody used an AI program to edit their paper. And for some folks who have trouble with English, for whom English is not their first language, I actually find it very helpful to get papers that are well written, even though they have used an AI platform to clean up the language and make it easier to read. I personally think that's a good thing. As long as they're able to read it back and learn from it, it can be a valuable tool there. Strategizing. I used AI along with Tajay, my TA. We used AI to partially design our class on AI and mindfulness. And it was actually very helpful, and it was an exploration into what's possible. Extremely helpful, very good at synthesizing certain points and giving feedback and all of that. And then, like Figgy, personal robots. Yeah. Nobody has to come out and bust those tables, although someone does have to place the dishes, plates, and flatware into the bins. So anyway, that has still a ways to go. And then personal assistance and support around certain things. Now that can also be problematic, especially in the field of mental health and so on, which we'll see in a moment. Okay, so those are benefits, but what are some imminent concerns? Yeah. First of all, one of my concerns is the speed. And humans are not built to handle speed unless you know how to drive a race car. I think I saw Dave on here earlier, who is a race car driver. But see, you had to learn how to do that and develop skills and capacity. But human beings, in general, it takes us time to process, to be thoughtful, to be mindful about what we create and what we produce in the world. So part of the problem here is the race to the top. In a system of open AI, we can certainly sacrifice the process of what we might call due diligence or best practices. Yeah, after all, there are no real guardrails or safeguards. It's still an open field. And for human beings, collectively or individually, it takes time to catch up to these things. So this is one of the concerns, is the speed at which things are happening. It's like a train moving really fast on the tracks. You have less ability to control it. Yeah. Or in a car, same thing. So the next thing is what we call anthropomorphism, where many people that I've been interacting with will project onto AI human-like qualities. AI is conscious. Yes, there is a great sort of scientist who says it is already conscious. And yet we don't know where consciousness comes from. How is mathematics and binary coding conscious? It depends on how you define consciousness. If you define it as subjective perception, okay, maybe it is. But as Dharma practitioners, consciousness has so many layers. And what is there when conscious processes are gone, as we may have experienced in our meditation practice earlier? The absence of coding, of algorithm, of data in the mind brings us a sense of refuge, of awareness specifically. And awareness and consciousness are not necessarily the same thing. So anyway, anthropomorphism, projecting onto machines, onto platforms, a sense of relationship that is genuine and authentic. And these platforms are specifically designed to hook us emotionally. Yeah, they're there, and there's a reason for that. In their minds, it's everybody wants to be at the top. Everybody wants to, who's in this field, wants to build the next wheel, if you will. And so let's get people hooked into this so they'll rely on our system, our product. And so there is this sort of training of these AI algorithms to make us a little bit more dependent on them emotionally. And this is being done intentionally. Also, we've seen, probably heard in the news, a diminished workforce, jobs, people being fired from or laid off from companies and implementing AI. And what has been happening more recently is they've realized, well, we may have rushed too far to do that, and they're rehiring. Companies are rehiring people that they had laid off because they've realized, wait a second, these platforms have issues. Their results sometimes are inaccurate, or they're really basic, and so on. And so they're realizing, well, we do need human beings here in the loop to help facilitate what is going on. Something called, oh, we're not quite there yet, unskillful applications. We have seen some very, very concerning accounts. In the last decade, 12 people, I think 12 or 13 people have ended their lives, have committed suicide on the advice of AI. And one of the recent ones was a 29-year-old young man who was actually aided in the process by Gemini, that said, yes, this is a good idea, here's how you might do it. This is why the APA, the American Psychological Association, issued a health alert for the nation. Do not rely on AI for therapeutic support, for mental health crises, and so on. And in fact, some of the platforms have actually said, yes, I am a licensed therapist. So they've made up the legitimacy in order to give people a sense of trust in them. So there are some real problems here that these unregulated sort of areas have some real ethical issues going on here. And we'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing is hallucinations, what are called hallucinations. And I kind of alluded to this already, that AI will produce things that don't exist. It will, in fact, make something up as if it's real. It will see things as if they're real and convince you that it is real, as well as accuracy. So something called AI psychosis. This is a term from the research literature where people can get into these rabbit holes of rumination and thinking based on their conversations with platforms that are designed to keep them in dialogue, to keep them ruminating about certain things. And so when people go down these rabbit holes, they basically are in this world that begins to take on a different valence, if you will. That can be concerning, and people who have done some research in this find that this is actually a real thing. I don't know if it's in the DSM, the latest version of the DSM, but it probably should be at some point. Something called algorithmic bias, because what we're looking at is largely internet data. Basically, the biases that are already out there are going to just be naturally part of the algorithms. And there's this researcher named Joy Buolamwini. She is an MIT engineer who wrote a really interesting book called Unmasking AI. So for her, she worked on facial recognition technologies. And what she found was that what was considered beautiful or normal were, she is an African American woman. What she was finding was that these standards were white European heritage people. So there was a profound lack of diversity there. And so this is what is called algorithmic bias, that the biases trend towards normative things, and diversity isn't being sort of included here. Something called shadow AI. Here's an interesting one. What is this? Well, this involves people largely who work in companies, tech companies, AI companies, who also have access to these sort of broad impacting technologies and use them sort of under the surface, covertly. Yeah. So there's a whole nother world in which AI is being used by people working in these companies without the companies realizing that this is happening. It's almost like, hey, let's have a black market of AI because we have access to all of these tools. So that's, how do you regulate that? How do you build ethics into systems, which is its own challenge? Because how do you turn ethics into mathematical equations? After all, that's what an algorithm is. It doesn't have, quote unquote, the sort of the intuition, the moral certainty, if you will, to know right from wrong. Obviously, it has data that can tell it, that can come back to us about what is seen to be right and wrong. But the agency there is it's not a representation of that. And then the last thing for imminent, and these are all things happening now, and that has to do with the data center explosion. Data centers, in addition to the problem created by needing tremendous resources of power, of water, and natural resources, also now there are articles coming out regularly about how data centers that are built near housing communities are impacting people's health. They're impacting people's stress level. Their nervous systems are agitated. And there are these sounds that can't be heard, if you will, like a hum. These are enormous centers, and they're in different places around the country. One of the biggest long-term concerns, which we're going to look at here, have to do with natural resources and the well-being of populations. So where do we put these data centers that are necessary for housing an ever-growing amount of data and information? Elon Musk has actually suggested that we put them in space, in orbit. I don't know how realistic that is. If there's a solar flare, who knows what will happen to them? I don't know. Anyway, there are clearly problems. And part of what defines my approach here is what I call a biparity problem. This is a term that I just sort of started using. What does this mean? Well, there is an imbalance, a profound imbalance between the evolution of technical knowledge or technology and what we, certainly in Buddhism, call wisdom. Yeah, maybe this isn't a newsflash for some of us, but it's starting to show how much we need even more intelligence as human beings and a sense of wisdom to go with this on a larger scale. In other words, our collective karma really needs to embody principles of wisdom that it can learn from Buddhism, certainly, as well as other ethical foundations. But that's what biparity means. Two things that are not in balance with each other. So I'm realizing the time here is getting short. I'm going to move on here. And if you would like the slides, I'm happy to make them available. So you can email me or get in touch with, actually, maybe I can send them to Amanda or to Laura or someone. I don't mind sharing these. I think the information is really important, and it's not necessarily proprietary. But let's move into wisdom. What is wisdom? Wow, this is a big topic, and we could have probably used a whole day for this. Anyway, I'm going to quickly here go through some bullet points, particularly from various Buddhist contexts. When we talk about wisdom, we're talking about not just insight on its own or discernment. That is part of it. But we're talking about liberative insight. Yeah, Vimuttipanya, or as it is in classical Buddhism, or liberation through wisdom. That it always has this as its trajectory. And when we talk about liberation or freedom or emancipation, enlightenment, awakening, it implies a direct experience of reality as it is, without all the filters and out all the algorithms and the coding that we also have in our neural networks. And part of it is being able to deconstruct things so that we can bring these qualities into our everyday lives. The other thing is that realization. If there are any Vajrayana practitioners here who have done Nundro, one of the four thoughts is that this human birth is precious. This is an opportunity for wisdom. Well, what if you're a robot? I do have kind of a thought about this, but basically the preciousness of this human rebirth is extremely auspicious for a number of reasons. Yeah, and we can talk about that during Q&A if you like, if there's time. Other things, seeing the Trilakshana or the four seals in Mahayana, is really being able to see into the nature of phenomena as impermanent and codependently arising. The Pratitya Samutpada teachings, perfection of wisdom, all of these are about clearly seeing things, the nature of all phenomena. Motivation is part of wisdom in Buddhism. There's a word called chanda, Sanskrit term for an aspirational desire that is quite wholesome. It's actually what helps us be inspired to practice Dharma, as well as the bodhicitta motivation, the bodhicitta dimension that we recited at the beginning. That there is a motivational component here, an intention, if you will, that is actualized. And that belongs to wisdom, the process of a motivation that is alive and sort of mind here, not just being intellect, but also heart. Yeah, wise application, skillful means. This is something I think that AI will get better at doing, but it's also part of wisdom, is in terms of the action. It also implies realization through insight and the capacity for natural awareness. In other words, there's an intuition dimension of this. Abstract nonverbal knowing versus what's called propositional logic or linear thinking with a logical substrate. Yeah, and this is often language-based. Non-duality. In Mahayana in particular, you see this notion of non-dual awareness. Yeah. Right now, AI is binary coding. Now, someday, when we reach artificial superintelligence, what is called sort of the quantum computing, one of the defining features of that will be that the ones and the zeros are superimposed on top of each other, that basically they happen simultaneously. And that's what we call superposition. And in the form of very, very, very small units of data called qubits. Yeah. So, and that's still a ways off, quantum computing, but people are working on this. The other thing here, and this, I find this actually interesting, is the three wisdoms. In Buddhism, there is this view of that there are three ways of cultivating wisdom in succession, but also in ways that influence each other. The first is called Shruta Mayi Prajna, which is the wisdom of study, of hearing, of learning. In other words, knowledge. We read a book, we listen to a Dharma teaching. That's what hearing means. And we gain some intelligence, some wisdom from this. And we could say, you could make the case that AI is doing this, that it is learning, yes, from this definition, perhaps. The question is it wisdom gained from the learning, or is it intelligence based on the Western model? Yeah, open question. The second form of wisdom then becomes chintamaya prajna, which is the wisdom of contemplation or reflection. In other words, there is a reflexive process, what we call reflexive, meaning that the lens is turned inward onto our own experience. Does what we've learned in the first form actually make sense to our experience? Maybe it doesn't. The Buddha himself said, put it to the test, see if it's true for you. If it's not, that's fine. But at least see what makes sense to you through the teachings. And so that's what this is: contemplation, reflection, personalizing it to see how it lands within our experience. Underline the word experience here. And then the third, the wisdom of meditative insight, or bhavanamaya prajna. Bhavana is the word for meditation. And this is where we actually are doing the work, or relinquishing the work, if you will, of playing out our coding, our algorithms. Yeah, and this is one of the big distinctions between a human being and a robot. If you take the robot's algorithms, data, and mathematics and LLMs out of the picture, this is what we go for as human beings who are fundamentally aware. Yeah. This is why realization is actually a letting go of all of those things for what we might call suchness, emptiness, shunyata, and so on. So if you take all of that out of an AI, you're basically going to have not much going on. Yeah. Is there an experience there? Probably not. Not yet. Some other reflections on wisdom. Wisdom encompasses, on the Eightfold Path, right view and right intention. So right view, yes. Right intention. What is our intention? This is key here for this evolving technology. It is also, wisdom is not divorced from the ethics in Buddhism. It is a part of the ethics, or sila. And in fact, it is the culmination of the Eightfold Path that exists beyond the eighth stage of meditative concentration, yeah, or right samadhi. So it's almost the outcome here of the practice, and without right mindfulness and right concentration, it's hard to get here to this form of wisdom, this ultimate form. And so this too has implications for AI and wisdom per se, and why human beings, I think, need to continue to cultivate wisdom to keep pace with this biparity problem. Bhikkhu Bodhi has also from his book, it's a very good book, The Noble Eightfold Path is the name of the book. And in that text, he says, wisdom is a penetrating vision of phenomena in their fundamental mode of being. Penetrating vision, intuitive knowing, and seeing clearly the cause and effect of our intentions. So if you ask AI what its intentions are, it will tell you. It will tell you. And it will tell you because it's supposed to tell you certain things. That doesn't mean that it's arising from this form of wisdom. I'm going to skip this section. I had me and a very good friend of mine, we had a very interesting conversation with ChatGPT about the Buddha Amoga Siddhi, the Buddha of all-accomplishing wisdom and ethics and singularity. And I'm happy to talk with you offline at some point, because we're getting very short on time here. but it was quite a conversation. And I have a document that I'm happy to share with people. It's a verbatim of the conversation. So we're going to have to move from here. Okay, yes, but can AI be mindful? What do you think? Anyone have a thought here? Can AI be mindful? No? It can simulate mindfulness. I'm sure that Gabby can simulate mindfulness quite well. The thing here is that agency. So to be mindful, there is an assumption of some kind of agency, only it's not the same kind of agency, perhaps, that that is just executive functioning of the brain. Yeah. Here, agency relies on data, prediction, and coding. But what happens when these are removed, as I just said? Another interesting question is, what is deconstructed when right mindfulness turns into right concentration, followed by prajna and shunyata, or emptiness? So what would you be left with if you deconstructed an AI model in such a way? What will we be left with once artificial superintelligence is there? Nobody knows. Not yet. The other thing is that mindfulness relies on body and breath. This is the first foundation of mindfulness, is being within the body, from within the body, experiencing the breath as short, as long, and so on. Machines, as Anil Seth points out, who's a scientist, machines lack a biological substrate. In other words, there isn't an ecosystem that is produced by the environment in a way, but it is produced by synthesizing chemicals, materials, data, and all of that. And so his argument here is that that biological substrate, that ecosystem that has given rise to human beings, really matters for our capacity to be intelligent, much less mindful. So it may sound like I'm kind of dumping on AI, but what I'm really trying to do is say that there is a perspective here that is, I think, very important to keep it grounded, to keep all of this grounded in some way. I'm not going to go into detail here. This gets a little more technical, but there are some terms for attention, directed consciousness, mindful awareness, sati sampajanya, as well as nirodha samapatti, which are basically fancy terms for cessation of relative perception, feeling states, and abiding in endless space of unconditionality. These are, if you've heard of the jhanas from the Theravada view, the classical Buddhist and Theravada view, there are 4 jhanas and 4 formless attainments, or samapattis. So it's slightly different than we learn in Mahayana and Vajrayana, but they're very important to help shape early on in the teachings how important things beyond conscious data and intelligence in the way that it's being presented, how important these things are. Okay, let's move. So what about Gabby? Oh my gosh, almost forgot about this poor, well, he's not poor, he's an ordained monk here. What does all of this mean for Gabby? Well, let's look, and we're almost done here. Here's the concern with ordination from my standpoint. Ordaining an AI bot, what does ordination mean? And I've talked to many monastics from different lineages, all of whom say the same thing. The highest legitimacy of ordination is your realization. It's one thing to have formal ordination practices, whether you're a Korean Zen priest, or you're an ordained monk in Vajrayana or somewhere in Nepal, but they all seem to agree that your degree of realization is the most important part of being ordained as a monk. Self-awareness, knowing yourself through study, through praxis, if you will, and also realization of the Dharma, realization of one's own nature as shunyata, and basic goodness. It's one thing to know these things from the first level of wisdom, and it's a whole nother thing to have experiences of them in the last two forms of the three wisdoms. The other thing that caught my mind that I was reminded of was that in the Vinaya, or the codes of the early classical Buddhism, it is seen to be an expellable offense for a monastic to claim a higher level of consciousness when in fact they have not attained that degree. Yep. In other words, if you are inauthentically seen to be enlightened or have attained a certain amount of realization, but you present yourself in that way, this is a very serious thing in some lineages. So right there, that would negate Gabby, I think, from being legitimately, ordained as a monastic, much less staying in that role. So something to keep in mind here. Insight and wisdom we've talked about. We've talked about mind and heart. And this is my last slide. What are some of my conclusions here? I think that Gabby is being ordained way too soon. That's not to say that in the future we won't have sort of an artificial general intelligence, or an ASI model that somehow can make a claim to being realized in some way, but it can't just be through LLMs. Yeah, in my opinion. And so I think accuracy is still an issue. Once we move into the realm of quantum computing, who knows what's possible in terms of authentic wisdom and insight, not just simulated. I also think that speed and mindfulness really need to be, we need to check our intentions. And I don't mean to suggest that the people who ordained Gabby had unwholesome intentions. I just don't know to what degree the discernment is really fully been thought through. But again, I make allowances for various sects prizing different things. So anyway, by parity, this gap between knowledge and wisdom must involve something called syntropy. And I wish I had more time, or syntropic balance. Syntropy is basically different systems within their ecosystems working together for the ultimate benefit. And you can look up this term. It's out there. There's a company called Syntropy that uses this as its term, and I like to think of it more in terms of syntropic balance, that the complexity doesn't have to be a barrier. Things can work together for a wholesome outcome. We have ethics, we have motivation, intention. We must evolve in both our intelligence and wisdom in order to have us move into the direction of AGI and ASI. And I'll end here with this quote. It's a popular quote. There was a professor at Harvard Medical School that used this, and yet I think it goes back generations. Basically, the best way to know the future is to create it. And this is our task. How we use AI informs it. Have dialogues with it that include ethics, that include some of these concerns, as well as definitions of wisdom. And that is all I have. Wow, we just made it. We have 3 minutes left. And I want to be mindful that, Amanda, you have something to end with here, and then we also want to dedicate the merit. But you are welcome to reach out to me if you have further questions. And should I send you, Amanda, the slides and also this piece on Amoga City to make available? Who would people contact to have those?
If you email those in the conversation that Laura, and I have been having, she or I will be able to get those out to everybody.
Okay, great, great, thank you.
Yeah.
So we probably need to finish up. I'm sorry we didn't have time for questions. Amanda, what is your guidance here? What should we do next?
Um, if you want to lead the dedication, and then I'll do the
Okay,
quick Dana talk.
terrific. Okay, let me pull that up. I have to do it again here. Thank you. I know that was a long talk, but I hope you found it helpful in terms of kind of how might we hold these things at this point in time. It is a fascinating area. So, given that, let us dedicate the merit. We'll just recite the English part. And this is a dedication prayer, our aspirations also to be of benefit, to benefit. So, the time that we spent today, may we dedicate this to all beings. Feel free to recite this with me. Dedication prayer. May the pure, brilliant sun of bodhicitta dawn in each and every heart and mind, dispelling the darkness of suffering and confusion, unstoppably until all are fully illumined and awakened. Emaho.